Hi,
Hi,
everybody. Welcome to another episode of PitchUs. My name is Tim Cooley, the author of the Pitch Deck book. Super excited to have you guys here today. We're excited to have Sarah from DreamCare with us. Jeff, please introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm excited to be here as well. Join Tim and Sarah. My name is Jeff Erickson. I'm with a company called Forecaster. We make financial modeling easy for founders, and super excited to hear Sarah's pitch today.
All right, Sarah, why don't you share your screen and then pitch us?
All right. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Kwan, and I am the founder and CEO of DreamCare. So I'm really excited to talk to you all today about DreamCare. So just going to kind of give you a high level of what DreamCare is. So our goal is to transform childcare by connecting college student caregivers with families seeking in-home childcare. Our overall hypothesis is that in-home care will account for 10% of all care given in the next 10 years. And what that means is that we see a dramatic shift in care moving to the home, whether that's elderly care, whether that's childcare, or whether that's special needs care. And our goal is to be synonymous with live-in care. We'll talk a little bit about our team, and then I'll go into kind of our model. So I'm Sarah Kwan, I'm the CEO and founder. I'm a senior leader from Amazon. I was the global head of learning and development for AWS. Previously, I also was a senior vice president of sales for GE Healthcare. I ran the MRI businesses, CT, nuclear medicine. My team really quickly is Colin Nelson. He's a CTO. He's an SDM for AWS. Additionally, Nick Reisfeld is the current head of sales and planning for Amazon Business. John is my CMO. He comes from experience scaling startups. And then Allison is my general counsel. She has a background in employment law, which as we get into this, you're going to see is key and important. And then one of our advisors, Elizabeth Roseman, VP of broad-based compensation. So as we scale our solutions, it's going to be important to talk about that benefits space. So I'll talk a little bit about our problem that we're out to solve and kind of why we fell in love with this problem. So, our problem is that childcare is expensive, it's decentralized, and it involves really steep trade-offs, right? It involves, parents need to decide whether or not they remain in the workforce or whether or not they drop out. So when I was at GE, I think I mentored close to 100 women returning back from maternity leave. And what I discovered was that the single biggest predictor of success on their career was their childcare strategy. So the women that I mentored that returned to work with kind of this haphazard childcare of my mom's going to watch them on Tuesday, and on Wednesday afternoon, I'm going to take them to daycare, and then daycare is closed, and I'll just put them in the bouncy while I, do some work and take a Zoom call from home. Those strategies almost always failed. And what they resulted in was the career of the female mostly just crashing and burning. On the flip side, the women that I mentored, where I discovered that they were really having flexible childcare, when they could take that 7 a.m. call with EMEA, when they could do the 7 p.m. call with APJ, when they could, be flexible with their work schedules, when they could stay late for the happy hour, as silly as that sounds, those careers all went up, right? And so we really discovered that the most flexible, most dedicated childcare is ideal. And that is that kind of live-in childcare. But there is this opportunity cost that, live-in childcare is fundamentally expensive, right? Nannies and dedicated is expensive. And so we set out to make a more affordable, dedicated childcare. We are a marketplace, so we have both supply and demand. So we need to talk a little bit about the caregivers as well. So the caregiver situation is interesting. One of the things that we discovered was we need to find people that can do the work of taking care of the children at the most affordable price point where the value equation works out. And so what we discovered is that there's a huge population of people that really want to go to college and can't afford to go to college. And so this labor pool is looking for a way to afford to go to college and the flexibility of going to college. We also discovered that this labor pool is actually pretty excited about online education and asynchronous learning. So while it seems like it's really different of people who want to go to college and people who need childcare, when we put them together, they can actually solve each other's problems, right? By actually providing the care and going to school at the same time. So you can see we talked a little bit about, the monthly rent is skyrocketing, which is one of the reasons why we're so firm on live-in care, and reducing that mental load for our students. So we cover everything from, their living expenses, their room and board, their college tuition is all included in our program. So I'll talk a little bit about our overall kind of our solution of making something that people want. So DreamCare gets parents affordable, high quality live-in childcare while simultaneously helping a care provider achieve a higher education. So that's kind of what we're out to solve. We'll talk a little bit about our TAM. So the childcare market, is $54 billion and forecasted to grow, at 3.9%. One of the things that's really interesting right now is that the price of childcare went up by 40% in the last 2 years, right? So you have this kind of skyrocketing cost. You also have like a very decentralized childcare market, right? So if you think about it, like Bright Horizons is worth $3.9 billion. They probably have the largest market cap of any of the childcare providers. From there, the next kind of notable competitor is Care.com at $500 million in valuation. So like, it's a very decentralized market if you look at who owns the childcare market. Incrementally, the CSAT for childcare is incredibly low, right? So, an ideal market to go after is big TAM, low CSAT, right? So one of the reasons why we're so interested in this market. On the student caregiver side, one of the interesting things is that a third of the students that graduated from high school in 2021 did not go on for higher education. So that's a labor pool that we're going to really need to make sure we address, and that we can upskill that labor pool. And, there are currently, about 20,000 au pairs in the United States. We probably are most comparable to the au pair strategy, but we'll talk a little bit about that. So we'll talk a little bit about why now and why this is so important. So the supply for childcare, right? Like it's just gone up dramatically, right? So people need care. With the shift to remote work, one of the things that we've really discovered is that people aren't driving to their office anymore, which means that 15 minutes that they were dropping their kid off on the way to the office is now 15 minutes there and 15 minutes back that they weren't doing. So that's an hour of their day spent driving their kids to childcare. We found that there's a huge demand and wait lists of childcare opportunities. A lot of public school teachers left the workforce during COVID, and those preschool and daycare teachers stepped up to fill the public school openings, which means that there's a massive shortage of daycare providers. We talked a little bit about the demand side of, childcare workers are going to meet the demand for the families, right? So what does our demand look like? High cost of living, high income is going to be our ideal kind of demand. Our price point, we'll get into it in a second, is going to be about $30,000 per year. So we are going to need those 2 income households in order to support our model, but we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So I want to talk a little bit about the competition and the competitive landscape. I think that that's overall helpful. So right now on the far end of the spectrum, you have free, right? And that is your family taking care of your kid. It's not ever really free. It's also the least reliable. So in all of the interviews that we did, the most common problems come with free. The next kind of least expensive childcare per year is the au pair model, right? So that's a foreign person living in your house. There's some interesting problems with this model, which is that you need to pay $10,000 to the agency upfront. So that's a pretty steep commitment. The CSAT for au pair agencies is notoriously low. And incrementally, the rematch policy of the number of times that au pairs need to rematch because they're not satisfied with their match is around 38%. So that's a pretty high percentage of dissatisfaction. We put DreamCare right in the middle of the spectrum, right? So like right smack in the middle. We're slightly more expensive than the au pair. We view ourselves as a much more premium au pair solution. We are less expensive than 2 kids in daycare. So we're about 10% less than 2 kids in daycare. And then where the real savings get into it is if you are going to go with that nanny strategy, we're probably 40% less expensive. So kind of right in the middle of the spectrum as far as childcare goes. So we'll talk a little bit about the business model. I don't want to go into all of this, but I'm just going to give you some high level numbers because I think they're the most interesting. Why is this a good investment for 30 families? As soon as we hit 30 families, we're generating $500K in annual recurring revenue. At 100 families, it's 2 million. At 4,000 families, it's 100 million. And at 10,000 families, it's $269 million in annual recurring revenue. As a marketplace platform, we're very interesting in that we're almost impossible to disintermediate because the employees are actually W-2 employees and we're paying for their education and their education is going through us. So there is very low incentive for the supply side to disintermediate us. Incrementally on the family side, there's very low incentive. If they do pull us off platform, they need to cover payroll, taxes, insurance, workers' comp. There is just a tremendous amount of cost that goes into it. And it's not that much less expensive. Plus, they can't possibly come up with a way to give the education without paying more than they're paying us. So it essentially, we're very hard to disintermediate as a marketplace platform, which makes us a good investment. Let's talk a little bit about our traction thus far. So we started with conducting interviews, right? We conducted over 100 interviews with both the families and the caregiver side. In our caregiver market, what was really interesting is that 90% of those that we talked to thought that this would be a dream come true, right? Like a way to pay for college was game changing. In fact, it was so high that as I was doing the interviews, I got worried that the enthusiasm in my voice was what was driving it. And I hired someone who wasn't passionate about the idea and their findings looked just like mine. So that was pretty interesting. The other thing is that for families, 67% were validated. So I want to be really clear that there is a huge population. There's 33% of the people that absolutely firmly do not want live-in childcare. And so I want to be really clear that we should talk about that. The market is so big that we're not that concerned about it, but we know it's a reality, right? So if in the back of your head, you're sitting there thinking, would people really want to live with their caregiver? Yeah, you're right. 33% firmly don't. But 67% of the market on a $54 billion TAM still seems interesting to us. We'll talk a little bit about caregiver recruitment. We started caregiver recruitment on September 5th. So that was about 3 months ago. We've had over 400 caregivers click the apply button, or at least click the message us, we're interested in talking more. So that's kind of where we're sitting there. We're pretty excited about the fact that all these people are that excited about getting their education and furthering it. We'll talk a little bit, sorry, my screen keeps going forward. We started family recruitment on 10/10. We have 2 confirmed families for a 1/1/2023 launch. We have a pipeline of 6 families. We're going to launch in Washington, California, and Virginia. Why are we picking those 3 states? It's pretty interesting. We've seen the strongest interest from DC and government workers who can't have foreign live-in childcare. We've also seen a lot of traction from military workers because they can't have foreign live-in childcare. We've also seen in California, the minimum wage laws are different, so the au pair model doesn't quite work. So there's been a lot of traction there as well. And then lastly, H-1B visa holders in Seattle, there's a huge H-1B visa population and they can't have foreign childcare either. So all of that is kind of the direct au pair competition. We haven't seen we've seen a lot of interest in people that are daycare families and they're trying to figure out like, does this work for them? They're moving a little bit slower. So the early movement is I currently use an au pair and you're a much better solution to my au pair. I think that will be our early traction. And then I think we expand out from there and pick up the daycare families. So we'll talk a little bit about the universities because that's pretty relevant to our business model. So for the universities, we have a partnership with Walden University and Southern New Hampshire University. Why did we pick these 2 schools? We picked them because they were willing to come to my price point of $432 per month of what we're willing to pay for tuition. Why that amount? The amount that you can gift a W-2 employee as an employer is $5,250 per year. And so because of that, we wanted to set our price point at exactly that amount so that we're not having our students pay taxes on an amount of money that they haven't earned. So both Southern New Hampshire and Walden were willing to meet these price points. For Southern New Hampshire, they'll take one class at a time. We have just over 200 degrees. And for Walden University, we have 4 specific degrees, but they can take more than one class at a time, and they can actually graduate in less than 2 years. Where could we grow next? So I started talking about our overall hypothesis, which is that live-in care accounts for 10% of all care in the next 10 years. And so caregiving for the elderly is a pretty easy one to go after next as we expand our market. It's another $2 billion market growing at 10%. There's also a lot of government grants in this space. So we can use the government grants to build a tech stack for this space. And then we will eventually take this model to business to fund for their employees so that they'll be like lifestyle savings accounts that they can put in their money for live-in care, be that elderly care, special needs adult care, or childcare. So that's kind of the future roadmap for us. So I'll pause there and take some questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much. The slide thing was getting a little crazy, so I'm imagining it was really bothering you.
Yeah, I don't know why it was going, but
yeah, that's all right. So let's start off with actually, we don't normally do this, but I actually have a bunch of questions. And Jeff, I'm sure you do as well. And I'm going to ask a couple questions.
Of course.
On average, doing your surveys, how long do people have live-in?
Yeah.
Like in the au pair market, how long do those people live with them?
5 to 7 years is the average number of years that they have an au pair, but the actual person can only stay for 12 months on their initial visa. And they can apply for an extension visa up to 24 months. So they actually have to change every 24 months, which is one of the advantages to our model, is that we can keep them for up to 4 years while they're finishing a full 4-year degree. So it's better consistency for the family.
And then the family who's hiring the au pair, how often are they with them for 18 years? Like how long do they stay with the child in this case?
Yeah. So in this case, they could have them, 4 years is our expected life expectancy of one candidate while they finish their 4-year degree. If they do the Walden program where they're going to rush through it and do it in 2 years, they could finish in 2 years. But we do have the option to go into MBAs or kind of advanced degrees if that's something that they want to pursue.
Yeah, but how long does the family have the care support?
So the family is going to need care support on average 7 to 10 years spanning the kids. So you really want that live-in care for 7 to 10 years. So the lifetime value of a customer for us once we acquire it is like 7 to 10 years.
Wow.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, there were some things that were just missing for me from a overall market. I still have a lot of questions, but let's get into it. Let's start off with things that we like. Jeff, kick us off. Unless you have any other questions, I don't want to steal the whole thing.
I think some of the questions will come up in our conversations, but no, Sarah, great job. And some of the things I normally we don't see people start off with like their team slide, but I think that worked really well for you because I thought you came out with some great experience, and I thought it kind of set the stage really well. I actually like the fact that you guys a big portion of your team worked at Amazon. I wasn't completely sure if you worked together. Okay.
We did. We were all together at one point.
Okay. Because that's a great thing. A lot of great teams have worked together previously. And so I thought that was great. The other thing is I thought the problem was really well defined. A lot of times we'll see that, people will skip over defining the problem, go right to the solution. I thought you did a great job. I understood what the problem was, how it would benefit, where the student's need was and where the family's needs were. I thought that was really clear. And then on your business model, I liked how you simplified it down. You gave us, enough to show that you had more to it. And if we needed to dive into it, we could. But then you kind of slimmed it down and said, hey, here's what we've got. If we get this number of families, we're it was like 30 families and we're going to be at 500,000 ARR. And the ARR makes more sense now that you mentioned that it's like a 5 to 7 year lifespan of need there. So those were all really solid things. The other thing I thought was good is, I mean, on your traction, you mentioned that you've got 400 applicants. I did wonder, and here's one of the questions was, on those applicants, did they know that there were only 2 school options for them when they applied, and that was okay?
Yeah, that's not, they seem very comfortable with the 2 school options. Nobody has challenged and wanted more school options.
Okay.
So
Cool.
Okay, no, that's great. That was one of the things that I wondered, where, you know, right now you only have 2 schools. I'm like, okay, is that going to, you know, deter how many students applications you might get? But that's good to hear.
yeah, thus far that hasn't been the biggest in our Venn diagram, actually, of like the 3 circles of willing to move in with a family, wanting to go to college, and experience with kids. The biggest circle is experience with kids. Actually, like 80% of them had the experience with kids. The wanting to go to school was kind of the next chunk. The smallest is actually willing to move. So there's a point in your life where you're not nearly as excited about the idea of living with a family. And so we've seen kind of a fall off there.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's great. So Tim, I'll hand it over to you. Things that you like.
So one of my favorite things that you did actually was your traction. I think for where you're at with the company, I think you highlighted the key things that you've discovered. I think we could clean that up, but honestly, like the content that was in there wasn't hard to decipher from when you were speaking. And I think you guys have done a great job of getting a little bit of that proof of concept, right? I think, like Jeff mentioned, the problem statement actually is very clear. This is a huge problem. It's a huge problem, especially in Japan, you know, and it's becoming an even bigger problem in America. And so I think we can help you clean that up even better. But I think that it's just a very recognizable problem if you have kids or know someone who has kids, especially if you're in an executive type role, right? If you are senior VP and above, you know someone who has this problem, and it's a real problem. So I think that's why Jeff knows about it, right? He probably went through it. He has kids, right? And so anyway, so I think that's clear. I think we can help you with that though. And then, yeah, overall, I think you had a lot of the content here that makes this a very compelling presentation. I think we can, again, clean up some things that highlight some of those like missing questions that we had, and some of the data points that just, you're not wrong, but I think they need to be focused a little bit better. So with that, Jeff, why don't we start into areas of opportunity?
Yes. Yeah, I like Tim said, I think there's some things that we can help out with here. So first off, the slides switching back and forth. I don't know what was causing that, but maybe go back and figure that out.
That was rough.
I know.
I thought it was my computer glitching.
I thought it was something glitchy, but I don't know why it was glitchy. So I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
We're really weird. So I don't know what you can do to prevent that, but you know, who knows? Anyways, the other thing I noticed was on a lot of your slides. So your problem slide, for example, when we got there was so much text on there. There is no way anyone could get through that. And so I know we mentioned this on a lot of our episodes, is that the more you can use icons or things that you can talk to, you know, things that aren't going to distract me as I'm trying to listen to you and read like 3 paragraphs of content, it is really helpful. So if there's something you can do to get rid of some of that text, and I mean, your talking points were all there. And so, you know, I would rather listen to you and have some maybe visuals that would kind of support what you're saying, as opposed to all of that text. It was really distracting. So, and that was also on your TAM slide. The text was super small. And I know Tim mentions this quite often, you know, your font size. I think we mentioned that 22-point font is kind of the minimum.
The minimum.
Right?
Yeah.
Very minimum. And so, go with, figure that out. Again, way too much text, and the text was super small. So
Totally. I can fix it.
there was another slide, the why now slide, same thing. It's just way too much text. So again, something you can work on there. When you're talking about your TAM, you mentioned a company that has, here's the opportunity and here's the size of the market that we're going off of. I got the feeling, this is a good size market, and I got that from the beginning. But then you mentioned that, care.com is kind of the biggest in the competitor in the space, and they have this little piece of the market. I wanted to kind of see a market comparison, a competitive analysis. Right. So that was something that was missing. I think care would be in there. I think if you could bring out some others, although I did like where you put, how you put, DreamCare in the middle of the au pair and the family, and then the other, more expensive options. I thought that was super well done. But then what are some other competitors that have validated this space, and what kind of market share do they have? Care.com was one, but I didn't see a logo on there. I just saw a lot of text that didn't even mention care.com. So that was something. And then the other thing was, I have no idea what you're asking for. So we're not sure, are you going to just bootstrap this all the way to, getting, you get 5 families and maybe you're on your way, you're okay. I wanted to get a clear indication of one, what you need to get there, what the next steps are, and maybe a timeline of here's our progression. We're going to have, by the, in 6 months, we're going to have 3 families signed up, and this is how we're going to get there. And then we're, by the end of the year, we're going to have 10 families, or whatever that looks like. But I want to see that mapped out to say, okay, here's where we're going. And then if you're asking for something, which you should be, then, I want to know where that's going to get you. It's like, we need $500,000 and this is what it's going to get us. And Tim's got, if you go through Tim's book, it will kind of go through the ask slide, and Tim's got a great formula for what the perfect ending slide of your presentation should look like.
So excited to read it. I can't wait. This is
seriously. I think it will be very helpful for you.
Yeah.
But if you can, close out with, this is what we're asking for, here's what it's going to be used for, and here's where it's going to get us. Are you ready to write us a check? That's kind of how you close it out and have your information there on that same slide. Tim, sorry if I stole your thunder there, but that's kind of Tim's signature thing there. End with your ask. There was no ask.
Yeah.
So.
So some more feedback for you. So I do like starting with the team slide, but I think you could, let's go back a little bit. You really started off with this hypothesis, and it's not a hypothesis. It is, but it's not. It's a market opportunity. And so I would remove the word hypothesis. Hypothesis is like a business model canvas, that's a biology thing. Like there's a market you're going after, right? Like Jeff mentioned, that problem slide it's just so many. I'm trying to read it and listen to you. I don't know how to read it to keep listening to you. So typically, if there are words on the slide, they should go in a logical flow, because we're going to read and listen to you at the same time. So we're kind of getting in parallel. When I'm reading like the lower left cube and you're talking about something else, like my brain can't figure out what is the most important, right? So keep that in mind. I really think that this whole presentation needs to be much more focused on a certain type of buyer, right? And I'm going to say 2. These high-level executive people where both parents work, and then single parenthood, right? Those 2 people have this problem, right? And there's a couple solutions. Family, let me go back a little bit. I loved when you said this flexibility problem, because that's really what's happening. Daycare solves up to about 5 p.m., right? Jeff and I are at a meeting, it's 7:30 my time, right?
Yep.
So there's not really a great solution other than an au pair, right? Or family. And I think that's really what you're solving here. And I
Yep.
think that all you have to do is change that element, and it makes the rest of this make sense, because you're not going after like, middle income people who are home from, who work 8 to 5. That's not your market. You're really focused on executives. So a $30,000 price point to them is not a problem. So let's start there. Let's start the problem. It's these people's problem. Okay. The solution, very clear. I love it. It makes sense. Again, we'll see if it plays out, but it makes sense. I think you need those data points of the questions that I asked, right? They need a person that sticks with them for longer periods of time. And you can go back to how the au pair model doesn't solve that, right? So anyways, so I think you can clear up a lot of those questions by just really cleaning up that problem statement with the au pair market. Okay, I spent a lot of time on that, but I think it's really important. So moving forward, we didn't learn till way later how much this thing cost, right? And I love when it comes right after the solution. We charge $30, $30K a month. And one of the things that we did not get in this presentation was, what are your costs to that? So on 30,000, we make $10,000, right? I don't know what the numbers are, but let's just assume that's true.
We make 12, but yeah.
Perfect. That's great, right? So that in one slide would have been awesome. Jeff, I liked your business model slide, except for it was too simple, right? So you said 30 and 50 and $1 million, like that's great. But like we have no timeline. We have nothing to compare that to from a market growth point of view. Like, what are you doing this year? Your goal is to get 5, let's say, right? Next year, we want to double that. The year after, double. We're going to double every year, right? And so you just threw out numbers, but we have nothing to
I
like.
have the ramp. I should have put the ramp in of like, our plan is 5 this year, 50 next year, etc.
Yep. So now we have a real solid market strategy, right, in place.
Yep.
So I think that was good. From your market slide, that is the overall care market. And I think that's great. I'm assuming that's just childcare.
Just childcare.
From a TAM, SAM, SOM point of view, I really think you should break that out into how much of this is daycare, how much is this is au pair, how much of this is whatever the categories are. Because the SOM, you mentioned there's only 20,000 au pairs, right? And so in your business model slide, you said 10,000. So let's assume that was year 5.
Yep. That
would suggest that you are owning 50% of the market in year 5. And that's just not possible, right? That's a big red flag from an investor point of view. And so making sure those numbers correlate to what you're really trying to communicate is really important.
And like, I think our vision is that we're going to pick up 2% of the daycare market, 7% of the au pair market. So and
you'll probably convert some family, right? And you can show those, right? But like to say that you're going to get half the au pair market in 5 years, you didn't say that, but that's kind of what that slide alluded to. It's just unreasonable.
No, and it's not the plan, right? Like we know that we have to, we can't survive only on the au pair market.
Right. So focus on those things. And again, now you have to shrink that entire care market down to those specific buyers, right? The single parents and then the dual parents who make a decent amount of capital. And that's going to really shrink down the market opportunity from the 54 billion, right? It's going to go way, way smaller. But just again, you have to communicate that. Yeah. So let me look at my notes here. Yeah, I really think if you can focus the beginning part on the right buyer, it will start to solve the rest of the issues. Jeff mentioned the size of font, like got to get that bigger, reduce a lot of it. And in a marketplace like this, you can actually focus one slide on one problem for this person, and then the market for the other one on 2 different slides. You don't have to jam them together. And so that'll give you a little bit of real estate as well. And then, yeah, Jeff, like Jeff said, make sure the ask slide is there.
Yeah, I'm excited to read your book because this has probably been the thing I've been struggling the most with is what do I want to ask for? Right? We haven't been fundraising yet. So we'll start fundraising in January. So this has been my intro deck with the premise of we're actually not taking money right now.
Perfect.
So the reason why there's no ask slide is because that's where I am. That changes come January, right? I wanted to get to a certain traction point before I went to go ask for the money.
Totally makes sense. But from a practice point of view, one thing we'll recommend, and just think about your team. You had, I think, 6 people on your team. Let's say $100K each allocation, and no one's getting paid. They're making like 60 grand a year, but that's a minimum of, $600K. So, and that's just to hire them, but make sure you have attached milestones. So we're going to launch in, I don't think you're in Seattle or something, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to launch in Washington. We're going to expand to Idaho, so again, if those milestones have to be baked in with that dollar amount, and then you're going to hire, your 10-person team to do it.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. I mean, I know I need to ask for $1 million. Like I know that's what it's going to take. And I know that what $1 million gets me is I probably, can get to 1,000 families with $1 million. So
Totally.
that actually runs us out to pretty profitable at that point.
Yeah, that would be great.
That's perfect. I mean, if you can kind of detail that out, and I mean, that's the investor story right there. That's what we want to hear is we put in this amount and this is what happens. This is where it gets us to. And, it's either another funding round to get us to the next level, or it's profitable.
Which, I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking is at that point we'd be at, 1,000 families and we take the funding the next round to go and expand out elder care and kind of really explode.
Gotcha.
Yep. Well, great. One thing that you mentioned in the beginning that I really would have loved you to come back to was the benefits.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you never mentioned it. And I think of this is a really interesting benefits play for those executives, right?
I also have a strong background in benefits, which is why I'm a unique founder for this, is that I happen to know the benefits space really well and know what you need to do to go sell into that space. So I know that you need some really solid actuary data in order to do it, which is why we'll need a study that shows that our solution has you go to work more frequently than those who don't have live-in care. And that's why the employer should fund something like this. So we'll need to go and get that study commissioned, and then we'll take that data and to the tech companies, to the Googles and of the world who are going to be excited for this benefit for their employees.
Honestly, I mean, that turns this into a, B2B play here, which, becomes really appealing. And so I love that angle as well and totally missed that. So I would put that in there somewhere. That this is another.
Yeah, it's in my end of my slide. I just skipped over with the wonkiness of the slide deck. So yeah, but yes.
So if you had that milestone slide, we're going to do this, we're going to go this, and then we're going to launch our B2B or this kind of study for this B2B play. Then that's so clean, and it allows a really clean, this is why this advisor is on our team. But yeah, I actually think that's very interesting. Very interesting, because again, they could donate. It could actually be more maybe donatable, right? Because if they're covering school, probably some benefits there.
Yeah,
anyway, it'd be interesting.
It could be interesting that way. Yeah,
we could talk strategy all day. I love this, but let's move on and go to the final question, and that is based off of what we heard today, not our relationship with you. I have heard your presentation before, so has Jeff. And so based off of those things, moving forward, Jeff, would you take this company onto due diligence today?
So I think the big thing is, you're missing an ask. So it wouldn't even go into due diligence because we don't know what there is. But even with that, I think there's still some things you need to get done. I think I like the whole presentation. I get the problem and everything. The traction, and I know that's what you're focused on, is get those first 2 students placed and have it go through a cycle. And that's what's going to help, get that comfort level to where it's like, okay, yeah, let's throw a little bit of money at this and let's take it to the next level.
Yeah. I mean, my big hypothesis has been that I want to take money when I throw it on, it's not to fix a problem, it's to light them, like it's to take off. Right. And so I'm trying to fix everything until we're at the point where when we throw the money on it, it gases. Right.
Yep. Yeah. I think you're
why there wasn't an ask is because we're not quite there. But we will be, we're looking really close. So
awesome.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then same for me. Yeah, no ask, obviously. And I know this wasn't what the presentation was for. The thing that I'm actually missing in this case is the market. I don't know how big it is based off the way that it was presented. And to me, it feels very small. Again, if we're comparing to au pair, 20,000 people is not that big of a market. It is a lot of money, but it's not a big market. Now, the B2B side changes that completely, where again, if you can be a benefits thing for single parenthood, that's a very different business model.
I'll just mention, and keep in mind who you're talking to when you're presenting. If you start talking to VCs, they're wanting this, $1 billion company, right? And so, I mean, bringing in that B2B play right there is essential to start painting that picture that we are, the next unicorn. If you're talking to angels and you're thinking, hey, we could have a profitable company within the next 3 years that's cranking off money. I mean, just be cognizant of who you're talking to and what the audience is and what your plans are as well, and how those align.
Yeah. Well, great. I like the idea a lot, actually. I'm very familiar with the pains, so I will follow you because this is really interesting.
Good. Yeah. Well, we're excited to give you something good to follow. So.
Yeah, let's go. Well, great, Sarah. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing what you're doing. If you guys need help with your pitches, please check out the book. It really outlines all that you need. Please apply, submit your applications. We're always open. And then if you need financial help, check out Forecaster. It's one of the greatest tools out there for this part of the business development and then moving your company forward. And we have a pretty sweet deal in the link below. So check it out, and we'll see you guys next time.